Connor Bedard is the best prospect since Connor McDavid back in the 2015 draft, and with the Chicago Blackhawks winning the 2023 NHL draft lottery, and with the 99.9% chance that Bedard will be a Blackhawk, we need to talk about how he fits with Chicago, how well he'll do in year one and throughout his career, and how Bedard will shape that Chicago franchise and just how much success they'll get. But make sure you watch till the end for the complete breakdown and hit that subscribe button for more draft and prospect content just like this daily throughout the year. You won't want to miss it. Now let's first talk about, of course, the ramifications of the Blackhawks likely getting Bedard, how he'll fit into the lineup, and how he'll fit in year one. Now to see just how well he'll do, we first need to talk about the prospect at hand here in Connor Bedard, who won't be turning 18 until July 17th. But you see at 5'10", 185 pounds as a center with Regina, he's been doing absolutely bonkers things over these past couple of years. And it really just started from his first WHL season and what he was able to do there. And you saw in the U18 World Juniors in 2021, 14 points in 7 games. You saw in his second WHL season, 100 points in 62 games, and continue to be great in the World Juniors in both the U20 and U18 levels. And then this year in the WHL is where all these records, all these crazy things happened. 143 points in 57 games and 20 points in 7 playoff games. He wasn't just a regular season merchant. Those playoff numbers were astronomical, and he unfortunately wasn't able to get past the first round, but it was not his fault whatsoever. And you can see in the U20 World Juniors as well, as a 17-year-old, leading Canada in so many ways. 23 points in 7 games played. But those point numbers aren't just a fluke. These aren't numbers that are going to be inflated by any means. What Connor Bedard does on a daily basis is just fundamental to his success. He's such a hard worker off the ice, on the ice, but such a calculated player. Has one of the best brains in the entire draft and one of the best work ethics in the entire draft. But he's the type of player that knows exactly where to be, how to work off his teammates, and especially get into the slot. And when you have as good of a shot as Connor Bedard does, likely the best that we've seen since Austin Matthews, really, you're going to have success at any level. And there was points earlier in the season in the WHL where there was kind of some individual play, but you can't blame him. He's Connor Bedard and he's doing what he's doing in Regina. You might as well force him to get the puck. I mean, it's going to happen that way. But I think when it comes to Connor Bedard, even though there might be some defensive inefficiencies, it's not going to matter. He can still put in plays physically. We saw that in the World Juniors as well. But that shot, that creation, and the way he's able to play drive, it's also fundamental to his offensive success. And this is a player that just has such a great toolkit to work with. But that shot and that goal scoring, I think, is really what we'll see the most out of him at the next level. But that's the thing. We have seen some comparisons to Patrick Kane and the way he's able to use his mitts and the way he's able to dazzle any defenseman and just use his skill in so many ways. I don't think it's the worst comparison in the world. Maybe Connor Bedard could be the Patrick Kane of centers. And when you look at what Chicago's had to go through, again, I am biased because I don't like Chicago all that much, but Blackhawks fans, this is the best case scenario. Right after the Kane and Taves era ends, you get one of the best prospects of the last decade. And even though the first year might not be amazing, especially considering the teammates they'll have to work with, I think at the very same time, having that growth and having maybe a year where there's some struggles there team-wise might shape Bedard into being better at that next level. I mean, the Blackhawks with Kane and Taves weren't amazing immediately. They had to find their success too. Bedard could be the same way. But then we, of course, go on to the team that Connor Bedard is going to have to work with. And even though there's maybe some competition just pure names-wise at center, I don't think Connor Bedard is going to have any trouble making the roster, any trouble getting high in that lineup whatsoever. When you look at the center group and what they have right now, they got Andre Athanasiou, perhaps, Jason Dickinson as guys. Of course, Taves will be off the roster, retiring after this season. You got Kurashev there, who could play center, could play wing. A lot of options there, but a lot of guys as well that could play wing if they really need to. I don't think they're going to reject Bedard at center, and I think Chicago is one of those teams that will want to build him as a centerman. And the center group, I mean, it's not exactly a group that's going to keep him away from playing at center. Like, they have so many wealth of options. Their best centerman is Andreas Athanasiou. I think Bedard will be fine. But then going on to the wingers that Bedard might have to play with, and yeah, this might be the only reason it doesn't win the Calder, honestly. I think the best case scenario, honestly, for Connor Bedard in year one is that maybe his wingers are like Tyler Johnson and maybe Lucas Reichel or something. That's the best case scenario with this current Blackhawks team that could be surrounding Connor Bedard. And even if it makes them a couple of free agent signings, let's say, it's still going to be absolutely dire. When we look at this Blackhawks roster, when we look at what they're going to have to deal with, Connor Bedard is going to be driving the bus. I mean, the only player that I think could even replicate a little bit of that offensive talent next year is maybe Lucas Reichel, who could hopefully take that next step into the top six. But when you look at the rest of things, if they don't make any other free agent signings, what's going on here? Who's going to be scoring at the goals? Who's going to be feeding Connor Bedard, right? It just feels like, I mean, you got the wingers, you got Anders Bork, Austin Wagner. I mean, Boris Kachuk is pretty underrated, I guess. Mackenzie Entwistle and Radish are guys, I guess, as well. But it's going to be an incredibly young team forward-wise. And even though there's a couple of exceptions to that rule, like Tyler Johnson, for example, it's not going to be widespread whatsoever. And with Bedard, he's going to have to work with a power play that has a lot of inexperience. Even though it might have a little bit of talent, Bedard's going to be driving the bus, man, and any and all offense will probably flow right through him, which, let's be honest, with Regina, I mean, he has experience doing that, so it might actually work out. And then when you look at the defense, I mean, it's not exactly much better. Seth Jones might be the only one actually feeding him the puck at all. I mean, I like Connor Murphy a lot, but he's not exactly an offensive dynamo. So for the Blackhawks and what they'll have to work with, it'll be interesting because I think with Connor Bedard, there was a couple of habits early on in the WHL season that he kind of corrected a little bit, but there was still some individuality, still a lot of feeling like he needed to carry every single thing by himself, which kind of created problems, especially later on in games where he would kind of just run out of gas sometimes. With Chicago, that might be a habit that returns a little bit. I mean, obviously being in the NHL, it's a much different beast, but Connor Bedard might also have the feeling that he might have to carry this team again and be in the same exact situation that he was in with Regina, and maybe even to a worse extent. I mean, Regina made the playoffs. They were still a playoff team. They had a couple of players who were all right. Chicago's in a interesting position, and even with Bedard, they're most likely going to be the worst team next year, just on paper. They have nobody. I mean, the 4 group might be the best part of their roster. And look at this. So even though I think Connor Bedard might still be in the race for the Calder Trophy, I think, again, the team might be the biggest reason why he doesn't get there. If he was on a team like Anaheim, for example, or even a team like Columbus, I mean, Columbus could have put him with Gaudreau and Laine. That would have been insanity. Even the Ducks, you could have had a line with maybe you have Zegras on the wing, maybe you have Terry, Zegras, and Bedard. Imagine how sick that would be. But with the Blackhawks, again, maybe the best case scenario is he has Tyler Johnson and maybe Andreas Athanasiou, maybe Lucas Reichel on his wing. Not good. Not good at all. But I still think Bedard will do solid in his rookie season. Maybe not as good as he maybe would have if another team would have won the lottery, but I still think he'll be solid enough and will still show a lot of great traits and, of course, that beautiful shot. I still think we're going to see him get around 20, 25 goals. And even though a huge amount of points might not be there compared to maybe Austin Matthews, perhaps, or that 40-goal plateau, I still think Connor Bedard is going to do very, very solid. Again, around that 25-goal range, I think is pretty reasonable, even in Chicago's system. And maybe around 25 points, maybe around 50, 55 points on the season, which, I mean, could be good enough to get the Calder, perhaps. I mean, Matty Beniers wasn't lighting the world up points-wise, and of course, he's still the favorite for the Calder Trophy. So maybe we see that impact next year's Calder race, even though I think next year's Calder race, especially in the high end, is going to be quite a bit stacked. But I think Connor Bedard's in a good position to get there. Again, even if Chicago is horrible, this is Connor Bedard we're talking about. He does crazy things. I could see him continue doing crazy things in Chicago, even in year one. Now, the thing that is interesting about Chicago and this timing of winning the draft lottery is that even though they have gotten this first overall pick, I don't think they can truly close out the rebuild yet. And I think for Chicago, another top 3 pick next year would be incredibly beneficial. Even then, I don't think the Blackhawks should be done building the top end of that core because they've really, again, only had one draft where they've gotten that stellar talent. Now, when you look at just the years past, you, of course, got Lucas Reichel 17th overall, who's looking like a very solid pick and a solid top 6 winger for the future. Drew Comesso, especially in that 2020 draft as well, on the goaltending side of things, is huge for them, on top of Wyatt Kaiser and Landon Slager and even Isaac Phillips, who's looking pretty solid for them. Then you go into 2021, which is kind of looking like an interesting draft for them. Nolan Allen, I'm not huge on, but him as well as even Del Mastro were part of this year's World Junior team as well as Colton Dock. So you have some interesting assets there. But then 2022 was the first year where they truly were in that rebuilding direction. You got Kevin Korchinski, 7th overall, who's going to look solid as an offensive D. Frank Nazar, who unfortunately started off this season incredibly injured, but got back into the swing of things with Michigan. I still hope could be a great top 6 explosive guy for them. Sam Renzel is a really interesting raw pick at number 25. They're building out a lot right now, and this next draft is going to be so influential for them. They've already built out so many draft picks, and these next couple of drafts, though, are still going to be incredibly important. I don't think the rebuild should be done whatsoever, and even though Chicago's prospect pool has been vastly upgraded, I still think there's some areas that they can really improve on. But you look at the Chicago Blackhawks pick situation, and they're going to be in a pretty solid spot. They got 2 first-rounders this year, of course. They got Chicago and Tampa Bay's pick, which is actually going to be pretty decent this year. They got 4 second-round picks and 2 third-round picks. So especially those second-round picks, when we're talking about depth, especially on the defensive side of the prospect pool, that's going to be adding a lot. But I think as well, I mean, last year, of course, they went for players like Ryan Green and Paul Ludwinski. I think for the Blackhawks, there's still a lot more to add there on maybe the middle 6 type of forward. They still got a lot of solid guys. They got, of course, Nazar and likely Bedard and Reichel at the top end of the lineup. But I think adding on to that future on the third line, on that second line, will be huge for them. And that will maybe come with that first round pick that's Tampa's, maybe in the first couple of picks they got with Chicago and New York. So a lot of interesting options here for the Blackhawks, but they've loaded up their prospect pool. They've loaded up their draft picks for very good reason. They're still in the heart of the rebuild, but of course, Bedard will help it a ton. They needed that top end prospect. They needed that franchise face, and Bedard's not a bad bet. But again, I do think it's important still that even by 2025, they'll have prospects and guys coming in the first 2 rounds with, of course, that lease pick in the Jake McCabe deal, as well as that Stars 2025 second round pick. And they even have an extra 4th rounder in 2025. So they've spread out their picks extremely well. And even if they were to drop still a 3rd overall in the draft lottery instead of getting 1st overall, they would still be in a pretty good spot, getting potentially a player like Will Smith or Leo Carlsson, and would still have a lot of draft surplus. But adding Connor Bedard now is excellent. And even though he might not fit the timeline perfectly, I think maybe a year ahead of time getting him would have been absolutely perfect. Still, even though there might be some growing pains team-wise, getting Bedard, you'll take it now if it has to happen now. And Chicago's in a position where prospect-wise, they're going to be looking great for the future. You hate to see it, but it's true. But I want to know in the comments down below, what do you guys think about the Chicago Blackhawks and what they're building? How do you see Connor Bedard doing in his rookie season? And how do you see the Chicago Blackhawks doing in this Connor Bedard era? Let us know all your thoughts down below. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you enjoyed, and share the video with all the hockey and Blackhawks fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my 2023 draft content right in one playlist so you guys can get updated on all the news and all the rankings and everything. And I hope you have a great day. Have a fantastic one, and goodbye.